In this video, we're going to continue to make the fender flares in the front end of a Subaru WRX using Fusion 360. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and welcome back to the next video in the series on Fusion Forms. This series is transitioning into more complex than I had intended, but I still think it's a good workflow and something that if you can get to this point, if you can learn the tools in Fusion 360 Forms well enough to create this geometry, then you can apply them to pretty much anything. At this stage, we have done quite a bit of work in terms of getting the geometry as close as possible to what the hood and the upper portion of the bumper and the fender of a Subaru WRX STI looks like. We're not done. Obviously, we've got to do a lot more work here, but this is a great starting point for us, and we want to carry this on and continue to make the geometry that is needed to replicate this body. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to carry on filling in this open section on the front, and then we're going to come back and we're going to work on these fender flares. Remember, we started on these fender flares last time. I'm going to go back to a box display, and we came up and we did this transition, and then we sort of rolled back into the fender. Well, in reality, this transition actually happens out, and there's a harder crease on it. So we're going to have to work on getting that right. And if we go to modify and we take a look at the uncrease option, you can see exactly where we've creased. So this edge is creased and this edge right here is creased. This one in the middle is uncreased. So this uncreased edge actually needs to be pulled up. So before we fill this in, why don't we actually go ahead and just work on this area, and we'll get it a little bit closer to what the actual car looks like. So I'm going to take this edge, pull them out, go back and forth between smooth display, and I'm going to double click now, and I'm going to pull all three of them out. So on the real car, we have the fender comes up, and then it goes in, and then it has another crease here. So it's going to take a bit of work to figure out where these vertices need to be, but again, we don't want to spend a bunch of time on the minute details. We just want to get the major stuff right. So if we take a look at this from the side, what we're looking at is this edge here. If we bring back our canvases and we look at our side canvas, we have this edge here, which represents the bottom of that crease, the flare where the fender goes up into. And then we've got this edge here, which represents the top edge. This top edge is where it creases back into this upper section. So this and this here need to come down a little bit closer. That looks pretty good. I can bring this one down as well. I'll bring this vertex down. And actually, I'll bring this entire edge down with me. This one here. So now when we look at this from a front view, what we want to see is this creased edge actually being out a bit farther, which means that this edge on the fender actually needs to come out a bit more too. So we want it to roll out into this crease, and then we want the transition to be a bit more realistic. And again, we're going to have to put a lot of effort into this, and we don't want to spend too much time on it when we're not quite there yet. But this looks a bit better. We now have a more realistic crease. The flare looks good. If I get rid of the visible lines, we can see that that flare looks a bit more realistic and what you would see on the WRX and the cars of this day that were replicating the boxy fender flares of the 80s. So now that we have that, let's talk about filling in the rest of this front fender, because we're going to have to work on this transition. Now the front fender here is going to transition down into this spot. Now in reality, the opening for the headlight actually flares back and flares up quite a bit. So one thing that I want to do is I want to take a look at this from the front. I'm going to bring back my front, and notice that we have this large opening. So this is pretty close to the shape of the headlight, but all this stuff over here is not. So I want to get rid of some of it. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to begin adding some edges. So I want to do this with insert point, I'm going to come from this corner to this corner to this corner, and I'm going to come down into here and say okay. Then I want to select these faces and probably leave that one for now, but I'm going to select those faces and I'm going to hit delete. So this gets me a little bit closer to that headlight shape. I'm going to go to box display, and that gets me pretty close to the headlight shape. We can use modify and edit form, and we can bring it in a little bit closer, maybe pull some of these vertices up. And that I'm pretty happy with that result. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with where it ended. But we need to carry on some of the other geometry. Like we need to take this edge, bring it all the way back around and connect it back down. So when we look at this from a side view, we need to take this edge, and I'm going to use Alt on the keyboard to begin extruding it. I'm going to rotate it so it matches. I'm going to scale it down a little bit. We need to bring this edge down so we can finish off that headlight shape. And I'm going to take this vertex, I'm going to bring it forward, and I'll bring this one forward as well, trying to keep the width or the distance here consistent. This section here on the bumper is one large straight section. We don't have any breaks in it, so we need to at least divide this up a couple times. In order to do that, I'm going to go to Modify, Insert Edge. I'm going to double click on this edge. I'm going to bring it back to here. And then I'm going to use my right-click marking menu, the 12 o'clock position, and repeat it. I'm going to bring that back as well. Now that I have that, I'm going to go to Modify, Weld Vertices. And I'm going to bring this down to here and this down to here to just connect them and say OK. Let's see if we can get back to smooth display. So you can see we have this big opening we need to fill out. This opening actually looks really close to the headlight. That's pretty close to the headlight shape. We need to do a little bit more work, but that's actually not a bad result. So what has to happen from here is we need to carry this geometry on, and it needs to terminate somewhere. Now, on the car, again, this sort of lip goes back quite a ways. So as we consider that in our options, we need to think about what that geometry is going to look like. I'm going to go to a smooth display. I'm going to take a look at it. It's pretty minimal there, but I think I want to push this edge back. So I'm going to go to Modify, Edit Form from the right, and I'm just going to pull this back. And I probably should do that with the upper edge as well. And I just want to get it back a bit farther. And that looks pretty good. It's minimal on the side, but it is much more apparent on the front where the headlight is. It's sort of sunken in. So we just want to make sure that we try to replicate that. Once that looks pretty good, I'm going to take this edge. And again, just using Alt and Edit Form, I'm just going to begin extruding it. Holding down Alt, I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to bring it over to this division. Let go of Alt, do it again. Let go of Alt, do it again. This time I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to let go of Alt, do it again, bring it up. Again, rotate it. At some point, it's going to end up being a triangle, but I'm going to just keep doing this all the way around. And I'm going to go to here. I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to say OK. And the reason I'm going to stop right there is because I'm sort of building out in space, and I don't want to get too far away from the design. So now using Modify, I'm going to bring these a bit closer to the edges that I want to merge them to. I just want to sort of make sure that they're not too far out in space. So we'll bring this one forward. This one probably needs to go back a little bit. This one, actually this entire face here, we'll just select the face and we'll just bring that entire face back. And that gets us pretty close. So now we can go to our weld vertices and we can begin welding these together. So we'll go ahead and just work our way around and move this down, grab this one, and then finally we'll end up over here. So let's say OK to that. And we want to go back to a front view and then just make some more minor tweaks to these. So again, Modify, Edit Form. I take this edge, sort of bring it up, bring these in. and sort of move things around to keep them a little bit more consistent. Probably need to do this from the side as well. So when we look at this, we can see that some of this stuff is pretty far back and some of it isn't. Now I'm going to turn off the side blueprint and just kind of get an idea of where that's happening. So I think this one here is what needs to move back for me. So I'm going to grab that and move it back. And that tends to help things out a little bit. And this one here, I think needs to move down maybe and back. It's hard to tell sometimes if it's actually triangular, but that looks okay. Let's bring it up here. This is why it's important to work in plane. You only want to be moving things in a single plane, because as we look at it from the side, we can move it in one plane. And then as we move it from the front, we can move it one plane, and we can keep it consistent across those. I'm going to go to smooth display and just take a look. And one thing that we want to make sure that we do, especially around the headlight, is we're going to have a crease. So this edge here is actually going to be creased where we want the headlight section to be, or we need to leave it completely open. And if we're going to leave it completely open, then we need to terminate this patch in some way. But for us, we need to decide what that's going to look like. So for me, I like this lip at the bottom where the headlight is. I like how it rolls in here. And then where it gets kind of tricky up here at the top is kind of where it falls apart. So for me, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to use insert point. I'm going to go from here and make a triangle. And then I'm going to delete this face. And I'm going to delete this extra face as well. And see if that looks okay. Now, if that looks okay, then I can be happy with the results. So far, it's okay. I think we can do a little bit more work in this area. If we turn off the visible edges, you can see that that result is not great. So it really tells me that this area needs a bit more work, and I'm probably going to stop with just this lip in the bottom here and worry about some of this later. So what we could do is we could connect these two edges and see if it is actually able to rectify that. So if I try to weld these two vertices together and take a look, you can see that it does an okay job. It's not perfect, but again, these are things that we are going to end up having to deal with. And when we go to our box display mode, you can see that they end at a single vertex. It's okay for now. That's something that we likely will come back and address, but it's okay for now. So I'm happy with the headlight opening. It looks pretty good. If we bring back our front view, you can see that we match it pretty well. So now it's time for us to fill in the side of the fender, this last bit here. The first thing that I want to do is I want to use bridge, and I want to go from here to here. I'm going to do a single face and say okay, and just sort of finish off that transition. Because remember, this is a creased edge here. This creased edge is going to carry forward, and eventually it's going to turn into a triangle. So we want it to end somewhere up here. So if I move that vertex for now, that's about where we want it to end. So I want to take this out further. I want to carry that design further. I'm going to do that by using Alt and extruding it. I'm going to bring it all the way out. I'm going to say okay. And then I want to use insert point. I'm going to turn this into a triangle. And I'm going to delete part of it. And the reason I turned it into a triangle is because I want to carry that crease up to a point, and that point is then going to sort of fade away. So we're going to go to Weld Vertices and put those two together. Now, it's having some trouble. It does not like these openings, and that's okay. We are going to try a tool called Fill Hole. We're going to see if we can fill that section in. Notice that it grabbed everything. That's not what we want to do. We can try this option, Fill Star, and I think we'll work with that. We'll say okay. And when we do the Fill Star, it's obviously this is not right. We need to do some work down here. But the first step is to come in and crease this edge. So I want to crease this and crease this. and say okay, and know that we're going to have to do more work here. This is not a good solution. We're going to have to take care of that. The next thing that we need to do is we need to fix some of these patches. We need to figure out how we want this area to look. We can do that by using insert point. So again, we're going to go to insert point, and we need to decide if we're just going to have all of these be triangular. If I come back to here, if I make a triangle patch, I have a four-sided patch here, but it's not really good. So let's go back to insert point, make sure that you don't have anything selected, and then we'll just go from that point down to here to finish off that. And you can see that we've got big troubles here. So before I do anything else, I want to see if I can have Fusion fix that for me. And it's not doing it, so that tells me that I need to do some manual work to get this. So I am going to delete these edges. I'm going to get rid of them. Actually, let's Control Z, let's bring back that last one. And the way that I want to try to approach this is I want to carry this point to the middle of this face and then to the middle of this face. All right, so I divided that up into a four-sided patch. Now I need to figure out how the rest of these patches are going to work. Sometimes the answer is to take this up and actually go through everything. Sometimes the answer is to just try a division, see if it works, see if it can rectify it. And if it can, that's great. If not, then we need to do some more work. So you can see these square patches are working pretty good, but we have got some issues up in this area. If we go back to box display, we've got a triangle patch here. We've got four-sided patches. We've got a triangle here. And the triangle patches are never really a good solution. These are always things that we want to fix. But let's manipulate the geometry a little bit. Let's pull some of this around and get it a little bit more symmetric. See if we can at least finesse it into a more realistic position. So if we view this from the right, doesn't look great from the right, but we can always pull that vertex back and we can say, okay, let's take a look at it in smooth display once more. And if we turn the edges off using Control or Command 4, you can see that we've got that crease in the middle. It's just not working very well. So the next thing that I would try is I'm actually going to take all of these inside edges and I'm going to delete them. I'm going to delete this one as well. So there's still a crease in there. It's still something we need to figure out, but that at least gave me a nice smooth transition between them. And now I just need to figure out what to do with this section here. So we'll go back, insert point, and we'll see if we can't connect some dots here. Let's see what happens if we do that. Once again, that doesn't work out, so we'll Control Z and undo. When we get into a situation like this, I think the best option for me is to delete one of these edges and then turn this into, instead of a triangle patch, turn it into a four-sided patch that is relatively close together. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to repeat that and just simply blend it out here. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to delete some of this other geometry. I want to get rid of some of these faces that are having difficulty, and we'll come back and we'll just simply patch them later. So when we look at this from the side, and we go back to our box display, now what we've done is we've transitioned this, or we've taken this from going to a triangle patch to now it's narrowing down. So now we've got one edge here and one edge here, but you'll notice on this back side we have three. So this instantly tells me that I should likely divide this up again. So that's the first thing I want to do is divide this up. I'm going to just find its middle, divide it up. And now I'm going to try to use one of the automated tools, Bridge. So on my first side, I'm going to have these three edges. On my second side, I'm going to have these three. I'm going to do one face division between because I've got one face here and one face here. And I'm going to say, okay. This doesn't always work, but sometimes it is able to generate it, and that actually looks pretty good. If we go to a smooth display, we haven't creased these edges yet, but the transition looks pretty good with the exception of whatever's going on down here. I don't know if you saw that, but there is definitely some bad geometry that's happening there. We will address that. We'll deal with that. Let's go ahead and get these creases worked out. So we're going to say crease. I'm going to carry this crease, and I'm going to just leave these uncreased and see what happens. Next, from the right, if we go back to our smooth display, so something is happening in this area. This edge just is not transitioning very well anymore. This is something that we need to take care of. So this triangle patch is not really a triangle patch. It's a four-sided patch. From the front, it looks like a triangle, and you can see that it's actually bending out. And when it's bending out, that geometry is causing us some problems. So I'm going to take some of that geometry and I'm going to push it in. So we're going to start pulling this back in. I'm going to go to our smooth display and see where the problem is. So this face is one of the faces that's the problem, and it's down here. So I want to try to use my utilities to see if we can repair the body. That certainly didn't work. So let's try one more utility. Let's try and make uniform. See if it's able to smooth anything out. No, our transition is looking pretty good. Our fender flare, the curvature is looking pretty good, but now we have this area down here that we need to fix. And this does happen. Like sometimes you are just working away and the geometry breaks. Something happens and we need to go back and fix it. Everything looks okay here. Nothing really looks out of sort. So I'm just going to begin manipulating some of this. I'm going to go back to my smooth display. And as soon as I pulled that vertex out, you can see that it was able to sort of reconfigure itself. It was able to work. So I'm happy with that. I do want to get this transition a little bit better. I want to tighten this up. So I'm going to use modify, edit form, and I want to bring these closer together. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I want to bring this up and bring this one up. And then take a look at the smooth display. So we're not ending in that triangle like I really want. You know, the car in this case has that triangular edge. So I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take it back to a triangle. We're going to have to do that with weld vertices. We're going to put those two together to hopefully get rid of that edge. You can see here that it doesn't look great when it transitions into the smooth display. And I think I'm going to try to fix it by inserting a point at the midpoint of each of these and sort of force the issue. So now if we go to smooth display, we have a little bit tighter transition. If I get rid of the edges, you can see that it's looking better. It's still not great, but it is getting better. And again, you know, this is one of those things where we really need to spend the time. And I think the next step for me is to insert one more point. I'm going to go from here. I'm going to go all the way through this geometry, all the way up, and take it all the way to the middle of the car. And that way I have a little bit more control in this area. Now, sometimes that can help push the geometry. Sometimes it can cause problems. I think we still need to do a little bit more work. I think we're going to have to add some more divisions in here to make this work. And it's not something I really want to do at this point, but I'm going to try insert edge. I'm going to bring an edge down pretty close. And I might need to do it on the bottom as well. But you can see that there's not really a good place to do it on the bottom. So we use insert point. We're going to bring one across here and see if we can transition across here. It's probably not going to like that transition, but we'll give it a shot. It's not horrible, but it's also, you know, it's not great. It's going to take some time to work this out. And I think what's going to happen is we are going to need a lot more geometry in that area. We're going to need a lot more divisions to get the transition how it should look on the real car. Now, this triangular flare that happens on the real car, this area here, it blends in smoothly here, but there is a very distinct sort of triangle region. And I think the way to make that happen is by getting rid of the crease. So we're going to select that, we're going to uncrease it, and then we are going to have to drive this with geometry. So like these edges are going to have to carry the crease. So it's not necessarily the triangle that's the problem, but it's the fact that we're using crease to make it happen. So we'll have to go in and we'll have to insert additional edges to have that control. And again, it's not generally something that that I like to do or I want to do, but I think that's the way that we're going to get that crease. So if we hide the edges, you can see that we are able to crease it that way and carry it up into the fender, and we just need to do it on the bottom as well. So unfortunately, the easy route didn't work here. I was really hoping that using an actual crease like we did on the hood would give us, an adequate result, but it just didn't blend very well up here. So it is going to take some time. It's something that we're going to have to work a lot on to get it to be realistic. But at this stage in the game, that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with those results. We need to tweak the headlight area. We need to do some more work in here. But we have the vast majority of the hood and the front fender. We didn't go down much farther on the opening, but we can play around with that a little bit. But we have a lot here, so if you've made it this far, you should be extremely proud. This takes a lot of work and a lot of time. Hopefully, it is still helpful. Hopefully, you are able to stick with it and understand that it just takes time. Sometimes the method you choose doesn't work. Like the crease here should have been an easy option, but it just wasn't working. So just keep in mind that those things do pop up, and you need to be able to continue on and work with those problems. So at this point, make sure that we do save. If you have any questions, please let me know. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.